So this is the wheel. Since it was invented around 3500 BC, it has changed very little. This is a 1964 Fender Precision bass. Since its invention in 1951, it has changed very little. I want to change nothing about the P bass, and I more than certainly don't want to reinvent this. What is up, old souls? This is Reed from Every Man Vintage, and welcome to episode number 4 of Storied Sounds, where we look at vintage instruments and vintage guitars through the lens of the stories they bear, not so much the price tag that they carry. As you saw in the intro, today we are looking at a beautiful 1964 Fender Precision bass that belongs to my good friend and bandmate Jordan. We play in a band called Someday Morning together. I'll put a link to our last EP on Spotify up here, so you can feel free to check that out. But this bass belongs to him. He's had it for about a year, and it's just an incredible instrument that I'm super excited to share with you today. Now, as with episode 2, where we looked at a 1972 Fender Telecaster, there's an abundance of information about specs and the evolution and the history of the Fender Precision bass, so I'm going to give you a very abbreviated version this morning. So it was introduced in 1951 by Leo Fender. It's called the Precision bass because you could very accurately note the bass and didn't have to worry about any of the guesswork that happened when playing an upright, being a fretless instrument. So it's called the Fender Precision bass. It originally had a slab body like a Telecaster, slightly different shape, but a slab in the same way, and the headstock was similarly shaped to a Telecaster as well. Went through a lot of changes, the biggest probably being in 1957 when they went to the split coil pickup that is now identifiable with the Fender Precision bass, and just about every hit that was recorded in the late 50s and the 1960s was recorded on something very similar to this particular bass. So it's got the split coil pickups. They moved in 57 to that Stratocaster looking headstock, as well as a more contoured Stratocaster looking type of a body as well. In 59 they started offering a rosewood fingerboard on the maple neck, and it was called the slab board because it was a much thicker chunk of rosewood that they put and glued to the maple neck. And in, I believe, 61, they started to transition away from that into what's called the veneer style fingerboard, which this particular bass has. It's got the veneer style rosewood fingerboard. It's got the clay dots inlaid for your fret markers. It's got an alder body, of course, the split coil pickup. It's got a beautiful three-tone sunburst finish and a tortoise style pickguard. This one is in such great shape. It still has the original pickup covers and bridge covers, which you don't see that terribly often, and it has the original strap button on the back of the headstock, which is kind of crazy to me to think of people actually, strapping a strap by the back of the headstock like that. But someone has also put the strap button on there on the upper horn, which makes a whole heck of a lot more sense to me. So there are some cosmetic little things going on this thing, but apart from those, it's pretty solid, and it sounds absolutely amazing. So let's jump into the story real quickly of this old P bass. So you would have noticed in the intro on the upper horn, someone etched in the name Jim on the front of the bass. And Jim, of course, is the original owner. He's had this bass since 1964 when he was 14 years old. He was looking to join a band with his brother and their 3 friends, and they needed a bass. So Jim's mom took him to the local music store called the Dixie Music Store in Boone, North Carolina, where the owner, Jared Little, sold this bass and the case to Jim and his mother for $259. Now you'll also notice that this case is killer. It's got the brown kind of Tolex like you would expect from an early 60s Fender amp, and since the neck on this one dates to May 6, 1964, it makes sense they're kind of transitioning away from that as Fender was transitioning to their blackface amplifiers with black Tolex, that this particular case would be sold with an early 64 P bass as well. So shortly after Jim got it, oh, by the way, his mom also ponied up an additional $400 to buy a 2x12 Bassman that he played this thing through for many years. But soon after he got it, he scratched his name in the front of it, which was a pretty common thing that happened quite a bit back in the day and was kind of a security measure. There's no denying that that was Jim's bass, given the fact that scratched right on the front of it was his name. He played in that band with his brother and their friends called the Roadrunners for a while, and they played kind of top 40 hits. And then when Jim went off to college, he formed another band called the Cardigans. Not the Cardigans, it's a much more modern outfit. This band toured around kind of North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee area. And at that time, as an inside joke amongst Jim and his friends, he carved the word "boosh," a real large and in charge, across the back of the instrument, lots of O's and a big old exclamation point, which I just think is an amazing part of this story and an amazing way to identify this instrument with an individual and the life that they led in the band that they played with. So it's a super cool thing to me that is on there. And the bass was pretty heavily played from 1964 to 1976. One other little part of the bass, the only other repair issue it had is I think someone had over-tightened the truss rod at some point, and so just the neck very, very lightly, there's a slight crack down it that I would have had a hard time even noticing. It's been repaired so long ago and it's solid you wouldn't even really notice it. But since about 1976, this bass didn't see a whole lot of use until Jim's son decided he was going to go to physician's assistant school, and Jim thought this was something of value that he could sell and help send his son through school, which I think is a super cool thing and makes instruments like this hold just so much meaning. And so that's where my buddy Jordan stepped in and drove to Knoxville, Tennessee to buy this instrument off Jim's son. Jordan has had contact with both the son and with Jim. He had a phone conversation with him that helped me get a whole lot of this information that I'm sharing with you now. So I'm super thankful to everyone who's been involved in helping this episode happen, because it is a super cool bass and I'm super stoked to share it with you. So as I go into the demo section of today's episode, I want you to know I'm playing this P bass through a Genzler Magellan 350 amplifier through their 110 cabinet with their bass array system. It's a super awesome amp. It's super lightweight and portable. It's got more than enough power. I use it on the road when I travel and play bluegrass with Audie Blaylock and Redline. I play my NS Design electric upright bass through it, and it performs every time. And man, anything you plug into it sounds good. Whether it's an upright, an electric upright, or the P bass as you're going to see now, it gets that tone that I'm looking for, which is definitely more on the side of a Jamerson kind of upright turned electric kind of tone. This is strung with labella flat wounds, so kind of that dull, thuddy, fat, punchy kind of big sound that you associate with, you know, the early Motown records and all the stuff of that era. So I hope you enjoy both the sound of the amp, but especially the sound of Jim, this beautiful 1964 Fender Precision bass. Well, there you have it, old souls. 1964 Fender Precision bass with labella flat wound strings being played through a Genzler Magellan 350 amplifier. Please forgive the playing, but I hope you enjoy the tone and the story of this amazing, amazing tone machine. And so if you've enjoyed this, go ahead and make sure you like and subscribe. Hit the bell button to make sure you're notified when I put out new videos. And hopefully by this point you're seeing that I'm putting out a lot of stuff that's not simply these longer storied sound episodes, but also the isolated demo segments, the record recommendations, all of that. Make sure you check out the Everyman Vintage YouTube channel, like and subscribe. And what do you think? Does this have the sound that you expected from a 1964 Fender P bass? Leave some comments below, tell us what you think. Look forward to seeing you next time. We'll see you later.